The parable of the weeds and the wheat, the secret of God's patience revealed. They wanted to pull out the evil immediately. But I taught them to have patience because the final judgment is not theirs to make. I remember that day the sun was warm upon my face and the breeze carried the scent of wildflowers from the Galilee hills. I had just finished speaking to a crowd by the shore, my voice hoarse from sharing stories of the kingdom. The people had scattered like seeds on the wind, returning to their farms and fishing boats, their simple, ordinary lives. But my closest followers, my disciples, lingered. They were hungry for more, for deeper understanding, for the secrets of the world I saw so clearly. We walked away from the crowds, toward a field of young wheat. The farmer was my friend, a good man with calloused hands and a kind spirit. He had sown the best seed, carefully tilling the soil, trusting in the promise of a bountiful harvest. His field was a picture of a flourishing life. A sea of tender green shoots swayed in unison, a testament to hard work and faith. My disciples saw it, and their faces reflected a deep satisfaction. This was the life they knew and understood. A farmer plants good seed and he reaps good grain. It was simple, it was predictable, it was righteous. They saw the world in black and white. A world where the good and the evil were easily separated and the deserving were always rewarded. Simon Peter, ever the most direct of them, spoke with a smile. "Master, look at this field. What a blessed sight. The man's diligence has paid off. The Father's hand is surely upon him." The others nodded in agreement. They saw only the promise, the potential, the pure and unadulterated goodness. They did not yet understand the complexities that lay just beneath the surface, the intricate dance of light and shadow that defines the human experience. Their hearts were pure, their desires simple. They wanted a world where the wheat grew tall and strong and nothing else. They wanted to see goodness triumph in a way that was clean and absolute. I let them bask in that moment, in that beautiful, uncomplicated view of the world. It was a gift, a brief glimpse of the innocence that the Father yearns for in all of his children. I could see their thoughts unfolding like a well-worn scroll. They were already picturing the harvest, the golden grain, the full barns, the celebration. In their minds, the path from here to there was straight and clear. They saw no obstacles, no challenges that could not be easily overcome. The world, to them, was a straightforward journey from planting to reaping. They believed that if one simply followed the path of light, they would find themselves in a field of pure, uninterrupted righteousness. This was their ordinary life, their innocent belief, their unshakable faith in a world of simple truths, and it was a beautiful thing to behold. I knew, however, that the time was coming when I would have to challenge that belief. I knew that I would have to introduce a complexity that would shake the very foundations of their understanding and force them to see the world not as a perfect field, but as a messy, beautiful, and complicated tapestry woven by the hands of a patient and loving Creator. It was a few weeks later when the crack appeared. The wheat had grown taller, its shoots more robust, and the promise of a rich harvest was even more apparent. But as we walked through the fields, a different sight met my eyes, a sight that my disciples, for all their simplicity and hope, were not ready for. I saw a darkness beginning to weave itself into the bright green of the wheat. It was subtle at first, just a hint of an intruder, but it was there, a silent poison beginning to spread. The farmer, too, had noticed. His brow was furrowed with a mixture of confusion and disbelief. He pointed to a small patch of grass-like stalks that were subtly different. Their color was slightly off, their leaves just a bit broader. To the untrained eye, they were indistinguishable from the young wheat. But he knew. "Master," he said, his voice a low rumble of worry, "look at this. These are not from the seeds I sowed. My workers were so careful. They prepared the soil with such diligence. But something else is growing here." His hands, which had so lovingly worked the soil, now hung at his sides in bewildered frustration. The innocence of the ordinary had been broken. My disciples' hopeful expressions began to falter. They drew closer, squinting at the field. "What is it, Master?" asked James, his voice tight with concern. "It looks like wheat to me." I knelt down, running my hand through the leaves, feeling the subtle differences. "This is a weed," I said, my voice gentle. "It is called tares or darnel. It looks much like the wheat in its youth, but its grain is worthless. It is a poison." The word poison hung in the air, a sharp and unwelcome truth. The perfection they had so recently admired was now marred by a hidden evil. The simple faith they had held, that goodness would grow unchallenged, began to crumble. A quiet unease settled over them. They saw the farmers' distress, the silent spread of the foreign stalks, and their minds began to race. How did this happen? Who did this? Why was it allowed? Their questions were not just about the field. They were about the world. They were questions about the nature of evil, about the pain and injustice they saw around them, about why a loving father would allow such things to grow alongside his children. The serene, perfect image of the field was now corrupted, and the disciples' hearts were gripped by a sudden, jarring sense of vulnerability. They realized that their simple belief in a world of pure, unadulterated goodness was a naive one. The ordinary was not so simple after all. There was a hidden enemy, an invisible hand at work sowing seeds of discord and decay right in the midst of life. The crack had appeared, and they were beginning to feel the tremors of a deeper truth. Days turned into weeks, and the crack widened into a chasm of fear and frustration. The wheat continued to grow, but so did the weeds. They seemed to multiply in the darkness, their stalks becoming more prominent, their heads beginning to form. Now the difference was becoming clearer. The wheat heads were heavy with the promise of golden grain, but the weeds' heads were thin and hollow, a mockery of the life they mimicked. The sight of them, woven into the very fabric of the field, was unbearable to my disciples. The farmer's worry had turned into a deep and desperate sorrow. He stood at the edge of his field, his head in his hands, watching his life's work being choked by a hidden enemy. He had done everything right. He had sowed good seed. He had worked tirelessly. But now it seemed all was for nothing. The weeds were everywhere, threatening to consume the very wheat they grew beside. My disciples could no longer stand it. They came to me, their faces a mask of righteous anger and impatience. "Master," Thomas said, his voice trembling with a frustration that was barely contained. "Look at the field. The enemy has done this. These weeds are destroying the good wheat. Why do we just stand here and watch? Let us go in and pull them out. We must act now before it is too late. We must save the harvest." A chorus of agreement rose from the others. They were ready for a fight. They saw the injustice, the blatant invasion of evil, and they wanted to eradicate it. They wanted to rip it from the ground and cast it into the fire. They wanted to restore order, to bring back the simple perfection they had first admired. In their eyes, inaction was a failure. Patience was a betrayal. They were at a breaking point, a point where their desire for justice and their fear of loss had become a single, roaring tidal wave. Their hearts cried out for an immediate solution, a swift and decisive judgment that would separate the good from the bad and restore the world to its rightful state. They believed they could do this. They believed that they had the power and the righteousness to pull out the evil and save the good. They saw the problem and they saw a direct, violent solution. This was their emotional breaking point, a moment of deep conviction that they knew what was right, and that they had to act on it immediately. Their anger and urgency filled the air, a palpable force pushing for immediate action. I raised my hand, a silent command for them to pause. I looked at each of their faces, their eyes burning with a righteous fire, and I saw a reflection of the very human desire to fix what is broken, to punish what is wrong, and to bring about justice on their own terms. I understood their hearts, but I knew that their understanding was incomplete. "It was time for the truth, my friends," I said, my voice soft but firm, a whisper that commanded their full attention. "You see the weeds and you see the wheat. You see the problem and you desire a solution. You wish to go into the field and pull the weeds from the soil. And I tell you this, do not do it." The words hung in the air, a stunning and unexpected command. Their righteous indignation was replaced by a bewildered silence. Thomas's jaw dropped. Peter's brow furrowed in confusion. They had expected me to agree, to sanction their righteous anger. Instead, I had told them to wait, to be still. "Why, Master?" Peter finally asked, his voice a low rumble of disbelief. "If we do not pull the weeds, they will choke out the good wheat. The harvest will be lost." I knelt down again, pulling up a small clump of soil. The disciples gathered around me, their frustration now mixed with a new sense of curiosity. I carefully separated a young wheat stalk from a weed stalk, holding them both in my palm. "Look closely," I said. "Look at their roots. They are so intertwined, so bound together. They have grown up together, drawing life from the same soil. If you were to pull up the weed now in its youth, you would surely uproot the wheat that is bound to it." I saw the dawning realization in their eyes. The simple, direct solution they had so longed for was not so simple after all. They saw the intricate web of roots, the deep connection between what was good and what was evil, and they understood the risk. Their action, born of a good intention, would lead to a catastrophic result. They would destroy the very thing they were trying to save. The clean, perfect separation they had envisioned was an illusion. The world was not so cleanly divided, and the lives of men were not so easily untangled. This was the shift, from a mindset of immediate decisive judgment to one of patient observation, from the desire to act on their own terms, to the understanding that there was a deeper wisdom at work, a wisdom that they could not yet comprehend. Their world had just become infinitely more complex, and in that complexity, they were beginning to see the true nature of grace. The silence that followed my teaching was not empty. It was filled with the heavy weight of a new understanding. They were beginning to grasp the deeper purpose behind my command. I continued to speak, weaving a narrative that was both a warning and a promise. "This is the kingdom of heaven," I said, my voice rising just enough to carry over the gentle breeze. "The man who sowed the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world. The good seeds are the children of the kingdom, and the weeds are the children of the wicked one." The words struck them with the force of a revelation. They were no longer talking about a farmer's field. They were talking about the very fabric of existence. I explained to them that the enemy had done this, that while men slept, he had come and sown his own seed. This was not the fault of the farmer, just as the evil in the world is not the fault of the Father, but the purpose, the reason for the patience was now coming into focus. "The harvest is the end of the age," I continued, "and the reapers are the angels. Just as the weeds are gathered and burned in the fire, so will it be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send out his angels, and they will gather from his kingdom all things that offend and all who do evil, and will throw them into the fiery furnace. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." My words were sober, and they understood the gravity of the final judgment. The separation would come, but it would come with finality, with a power that was not theirs to wield. "Then," I said, my voice now filled with a triumphant promise, "the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. He who has ears to hear, let him hear." The purpose was clear. The purpose was not for men to be the judge. The purpose was for them to be the sowers of the good seed, and to be the children of the kingdom, growing patiently alongside those who were not. The purpose was to trust in the timing of the Father, and to understand that the final separation would be done with a perfect and ultimate authority that was not human. It was an exercise in faith, a call to surrender the desire for immediate earthly justice in favor of a spiritual patience that trusted in the perfection of the Father's plan. The purpose of their lives was not to pull weeds. It was to become the wheat. I left them that day to contemplate the lesson, to let the truth of it settle deep into their hearts like a seed in rich soil. The air was no longer filled with the hurried energy of their frustration. Instead, a quiet solemnity had fallen over them. They no longer looked at the field as a problem to be solved, but as a living, breathing testament to the Father's patience and wisdom. They walked back toward the village, their conversation a soft murmur of reflection and a growing sense of awe. I saw the change in them. The simple, childlike desire to separate the good from the evil had been replaced with a more profound and complex understanding of the human condition. They were beginning to see the world not as a battlefield where they were to fight and destroy their enemies, but as a garden where they were to grow and spread the light of the Father. They looked at the men and women they passed on the path with new eyes. They saw the potential for both wheat and weed, both good and evil, intertwined in every human heart. They understood that their mission was not to judge, but to love. This lesson became a cornerstone of their ministry. When they encountered sinners, they did not condemn them. When they were betrayed, they did not seek immediate revenge. When the world seemed filled with injustice and darkness, they remembered the roots of the wheat and the weeds, and they remembered the promise of the harvest. They learned to trust that the Father was at work, that his plan was unfolding in ways they could not see, and that a final, perfect judgment was coming, but it was not their place to wield it. Years later, I would hear of how they went into the world and did not uproot the people who were different from them. They did not try to separate the righteous from the unrighteous in their own strength. They simply sowed the good seed of the gospel, and they allowed the Holy Spirit to do the work of conviction and transformation. They learned to be patient, to be compassionate, and to wait for the final harvest when the angels would come and make the perfect separation. The parable, once a simple story about a farmer's field, had become the very foundation of their mission, a living, breathing truth that had transformed their hearts and their ministry. They had learned to trust that the Father's judgment was perfect and that their role was simply to grow and to shine, patiently waiting for the day when the wheat would finally be gathered into the barn. The parable of the weeds and the wheat was a seed planted in fertile soil, but one that required patience to germinate. I saw their confused looks, especially Peter's, whose impulsive and ardent nature desired immediate results and a clear division between good and evil. They asked, "Lord, explain to us the parable of the weeds in the field." I smiled, for their quest for clarity was the first step toward growth. Patiently, I revealed its deeper meaning, explaining that the field was the world, the sower was the Son of Man, the good seed were the children of the kingdom, and the weeds, the children of the evil one. The enemy who sowed them was the devil, the harvest, the end of the age, and the reapers, the angels. Despite the explanation, I knew that true understanding would not come from a simple lesson, but from experience. They still struggled with the idea of coexisting with evil. Human logic demanded immediate action. They wanted the kingdom of God to be a place of instant purity, where every sin, every injustice was rooted out the moment it was revealed. Their vision was of a purified world, built on a foundation of quick and uncompromising judgment. But my kingdom is not of this world. Spiritual growth is a gradual process, a journey full of imperfections. I saw them struggle with patience when we met the tax collector Zacchaeus. To my disciples, especially Matthew, who had already left that life, Zacchaeus was the personified weed, a traitor, a parasite who fed on the people. Their disdain was palpable when I announced I would stay at his house. They murmured, "He has gone to be the guest of a sinner." But I saw beyond the appearances, beyond the superficial greed, and saw a heart hungry for redemption. My patience with Zacchaeus was a living demonstration of the parable. It was not my role to judge or uproot, but to bring salvation. On another occasion, James and John, the sons of thunder, displayed their impatience when a Samaritan village refused to receive us. They asked me, "Lord, do you want us to command fire to come down from heaven and consume them as Elijah did?" Their anger was justified by the contempt, but their response was that of the hasty reaper, who would pull up the wheat along with the weeds. They were ready for destruction in the name of righteousness, but they did not realize that vengeance was not my mission. I rebuked them, reminding them that their purpose was to save lives, not to destroy them. Through these experiences, the true meaning of the parable began to take root in their hearts. They began to realize that hasty judgment was a weakness, and that true strength lay in patience and compassion. They learned that their mission was not to separate the wheat from the weeds, but to sow the seed of love and truth everywhere. Over time, this lesson transformed them from the inside out. Peter, once so impulsive, became the rock, but a rock that understood the value of humility and tolerance. He denied me 3 times, an act of a weed in his own life, but I forgave and restored him, teaching him firsthand the patience of the sower. He knew what it was to be forgiven, so he could forgive others. John, once the son of thunder, became the apostle of love. He learned that anger and judgment were a form of violence that only served to drive people away from the kingdom. In his letters, he wrote about the importance of mutual love and forgiveness, showing that he had understood that the love of God is revealed in patience with human imperfection. On their journey, the disciples became my reapers, but not in the sense they initially thought. They did not pull out the weeds, but rather harvested the wheat, bringing souls to the kingdom through their message of hope and salvation. They understood that judgment was not their task, but the Father's, and that their work was to love, to forgive, and to wait, trusting that in due time the harvest would separate the weeds from the wheat. The parable of the weeds and the wheat was more than a simple story. It was a way of life, a challenge to the human nature to judge, and a lesson in divine patience. It was the foundation on which they built my kingdom on earth, not with a sword or judgment, but with love, patience, and the unwavering belief in the ultimate goodness of God. I see your heart, restless and yearning for a world without blemish. You look at the field of your life and the world around you, seeing the weeds and asking, as my disciples once did, "Why are they here?" You long for a clean sweep, for every injustice and every falsehood to be torn from the earth at once. I hear your questions, and I know your frustration is born from a desire for purity, but I ask you to be patient with the soil. For the kingdom is a gradual and sacred work. Just as Zacchaeus was a weed in the eyes of many, I saw his true hunger for a new life. My disciples too struggled with this, believing some were too far gone to be part of the harvest. Yet in my patience with him, I showed them that the mission is not to condemn but to save. Do not be so quick to judge those you see as different or flawed. You cannot see what's happening within their hearts, the yearning for redemption that may one day burst forth into life. I see your passion for righteousness, just as I saw the fire in James and John, the sons of thunder. They wanted to call down fire on those who rejected us, but they did not yet understand. My purpose is not destruction but salvation, and your passion should reflect this. If this message of love and patience resonates with you, please like this video, subscribe to our channel for more guidance, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Help me spread this truth far and wide, that all may know the Father's boundless patience. Watch how my disciples were transformed by this very lesson. Peter, so quick to draw a sword, became a cornerstone of my church. Having learned the profound weight of my forgiveness in his own life, he understood the patience of the sower firsthand. And John, once seeking fire from heaven, became the apostle of love, teaching that anger and judgment only drive people away from the kingdom. They learned to see with my eyes, to act with my heart. Your task is not to be a hasty reaper, pulling out the weeds with a hand that might also tear up the good grain. Instead, your sacred work is to be a sower of love. Sow kindness in difficult moments, plant forgiveness where there is hurt, and cultivate hope where others see only despair. Trust in the Father's timing and his ultimate judgment. Your role is simply to be a beacon, a vessel of my truth, nurturing the wheat in a world full of weeds. Never forget, my kingdom is not built on swift judgment or earthly perfection. It is built on the quiet, patient work of love. I am with you always, in the field of your own life and in the world at large, watching over the harvest. Have faith that in the end everything will be set right, and all who have been patiently tended will be gathered into my storehouse. Rest in this profound truth. You are a part of my grand and patient plan,